So here I have a range of pencils, and I'll start with my favorite. My favorite is the General Sketch and Peel. Now the Sketch and Peel is a cheaper pencil than the higher brands of Conte and Faber and Castell, for instance. But I like it. I prefer it because of its smoothness. They've managed to make a pencil that has very little grit in it and still has a great range of darks. So that's my go-to. And another good reason for the Generals is that it's widely available even within newsagents outside of specialty stores like art stores. So you can pick them up pretty much anywhere. And they've got a 100-year history, so all good. And I have no affiliation with them, by the way. I just like them. So it's an honest review. Now, the strange thing with the Sketch and Peel is there's no instructions on how to actually work it. What we have to do is pull that little string down and unravel up. And practically everyone I've met had no idea how to do this and started hacking away at the paper with a scalpel blade. Now you can see here on my little table here I've got a blade which I bought from a hardware store, and you can buy them in packs of 50. Now when this pencil comes out of its box, it has basically an end to it that is not great for drawing, in my opinion, not for professional drawing where we want a longer edge. Now this one had broken and you get bad batches. You can see why that's a square end to it. Now if that ever happens, you can put it in the microwave for just a few seconds. Be very careful because it can explode. It's a bomb in the making, a small bomb in its compact nature of that wood around the binded charcoal. Now what I'm doing is I'm supporting the lead with my finger, and it looks dangerous, like you would cut your finger that way, but scientifically there's no chance of that because the pencil lead is in front of the finger. But if the finger went above that point, then yes, you could cut your finger. So be very careful not to have the end above that point. Still be very careful with the blade. So I'm cutting downwards, and I'm revolving that lead with my thumb and second finger. So my middle finger is revolving with the thumb. It may not be so evident to begin with there, but watch as I go along. And that gives me a pretty quick sharpen. I watched an artist sharpen a pencil on the internet. It took him half an hour. We can do it in a few minutes. Now you can see the two marks that are made there. That means the pencil isn't sharpened properly. Once again, I'm supporting the lead with my finger, and I'm rolling the thumb as well and shaving it on this sandpaper block. And you can see we're starting to get a nice end to it. So what we want to do is get that pencil down as low as we can without it just ending up as a straight lead again. And the lower we can get it and still have that witch's hat point to it, then the broader the stroke we can make. It's a fine art. And while I'm doing this, I'm also turning it. Note the thumb is turning all the time. And once you get into that idea of turning as you sharpen, also get into that rhythm of turning as you draw, because you can actually hone the pencil on your drawings by constantly turning the pencil as you draw. And then you get an even better sharpen. So you can call this stage one of the sharpening. And then when you draw, you're actually sharpening and refining the pencil more. So you'll find as you work with the pencil that the pencil gets better as you go along because you're in this mode of constantly turning. Now look at the last stage here as I turn lots and lots, and I'm feeling it and watching the mark that's made on the paper and going back to the sanding pad. I've actually stopped supporting it on the sanding pad because by this point I'm actually sharpening lighter. I'm doing a lighter sharpen on that. You'll get to understand the pressure. And the longer the lead, the easier the breakage is going to be. So I'd say at this point the breakage is close to the max, but it's perfect. It's a perfect point for me, that length. I've done very long lengths before, so there's my perfect length. Here's a longer length right here, and this is a simpler sharpen. This is basically just sharpening right on one edge, and you can actually do this straight onto the sanding block. You don't need to actually sharpen it with a blade Just support the end and just keep sharpening away, and you've got a big broad end to it. So that's a nice quick start for big broad strokes. And so the easiest sharpener in the world right there. And you can make a longer lead for that reason. You're not constantly putting pressure on the end with your blade. Now here's another pencil, and this is a darker pencil. I use Generals and I use PITT charcoal pencils as well. And PITT come from Germany. Very good brand. And note how I sharpen with the blade. I push in and pull up at the end because I want to put the least amount of pressure on the actual lead itself. The difference between a cheap pencil and an expensive pencil is that the expensive pencil has a softer wood and a harder binding agent. Now you saw that that broke off, and even with an expensive pencil like this, they can be dropped when being moved or distributed, and the whole box can shatter. Once again, into the microwave for a few seconds. And if that doesn't help, then you've got a pencil that's beyond fixing. Apart from one thing, we can use it as a smaller point. I'm leaving a long end at the back here with the wood, and that is going to support it as a structure while I sharpen up to that point. And then at the very end, I'll go around the back and see if I can sharpen a point off of it. So I'm keeping this one at a smaller point. So this is a good exercise to explore for a broken pencil. Pencil this expensive, you want to be able to use it. And even if it breaks right down, I'll sometimes save the actual lead itself. If I've sharpened it to a nice point and then it broke, you can still use the lead that broke off and use it just like a piece of charcoal. So I'm going in here to try and rescue this broken pencil now. I'm going very light, supporting the pencil with my finger. Make sure that you don't tilt the pencil too much or you'll break it as well. So I'm leaning this pencil pretty flat on my finger to get that, and supporting it and very lightly sharpening at this point, because any pressure at all is going to break that pencil. Okay, so very, very light, and you'll just have to learn to feel this. Just think of it like a little bird in your hand. You don't want to feel that pressure too much. You know, you're being very delicate here. This is a delicate little bird of a pencil. And every once in a while you'll feel a lump that all the rolling in the world won't fix. That's what I'm doing here. I'm just working on one piece that feels like it needs a little bit more shaving off one edge. And when you get to the final point where you've got your little witch's hat, you keep testing it on the paper. Now I've rescued this pencil, a broken pencil that seemed to have no hope of life, just by working very delicately with it. So the same routine as we saw before, but a lighter touch all the way through. Like I say, you can spend a half hour sharpening a pencil. But what I tend to do is use this routine here, and eventually we get a nice pencil. So that one's pretty solid now. It hasn't had too much trauma. Sometimes the pencil is broken just near the end, but I find that if it's broken, it's all the way through mostly. Alright, so the microwave trick is one, and this combined, we can save pencils. At the very beginning, I had a whole box of pencils and they were just lost. Every one of them, I had no idea what to do with them. They just kept breaking. And that could be very frustrating. Okay, so a little wipe with a tissue when you get to the drawing stage, and just say you're sharpening a pencil in the shop, in the workshop itself, then you want to wipe it on the tissue because you want to draw with it immediately. For me, I sharpen all my pencils at once, put them in a little pencil case, and put some tissue under and above so that it protects the lead on its travels, because if a lead or a pencil is moving around in the pencil box, it can break. So pencils are delicate, and these are high-end pencils, so they're expensive, and we want to take care of them. So very sharp blade here, and just lightly honing the edge. Don't be stingy with the blades. When they get blunt, they're just going to break your pencils. So take them and then just put them in your craft knife if you want, and use them for other purposes. So I buy them in a box of 50, and they're very cheap. And they're, for me anyway, they're much better than the craft knife that it fits into. That's got a heavy handle to it. And when you're using your hand on that heavy handle, you tend to be heavy-handed. So here you've got closer to the source. You've got your hand, which is much more delicate in the nature of feeling how this is, compared to another object getting between you and the blade, which is the heavy-ended handle. And for me, those knives never worked, especially those swivel ones. I have never found them of any use at all. Okay, so here I have my 3 kinds of pencil that I generally use. The PITT for the darker darks, the generals for general, and the point on that is my perfect length. I used to have lengths like the flat-edged one, but they tended to break all the time. So PITT charcoal medium, FABER CASTELL, and if I could speak German, I would pronounce the middle of that. I'll have to ask my German friends how to pronounce that. Okay, so there's beautiful points, and I will buy a box and sharpen the entire box. And what you can do if you buy a box is just bring the entire box with you and put a little bit of tissue in there too. And this is the general Peel and Sketch Soft. I like the soft the best, but they tend to break the most. But sometimes you get a batch of soft and they're just never breaking, and it's fantastic. So if that frustrates you, especially at the start, then buy the medium or the hard even. This was my favorite charcoal pencil of all time. And then batch after batch was breaking. And that's why I've sharpened it at both ends there, because it's the end of my supply that was working. So you'll get that sometimes. So I've got this darker batch now, which is a kind of different carbon to it, and it's stronger. So in the search for the brown labeled ones, when it came to an end, I went into the black labeled ones. And this is a good alternative to the PRIMO, but it hasn't got as thick a lead to it. But it gives you a lovely dark. And that's from Generals as well. Look how beautiful that dark is. Reason for me using charcoal rather than graphite is that it's non-shiny for a start, so we can photograph it easier, and the carbon sketch is nice too. And also what it does is that you don't have to buy different grades. You don't have to get a HB or go up to 5B and 6B. The pressure of the pencil itself, your hand on the surface, will give you a darker mark right down to the lightest mark. And that does 2 things. It means you don't have to go pick pencils to guess a gradient dark. So I hope all those little tips and tricks there help you to prepare for your art and to move forward with more confidence as you draw. Because there's an old adage that you can draw with anything, but if you're drawing with good tools, then you're drawing better. And that's a fact. All right, everyone, until we meet in the classroom, I wish you the very best of luck in sharpening your pencils. Good luck.